bring in foreign investment, to get out of the difficult economic situation which we are in. We feel that this is a great opportunity. Fortunately for Pakistan, China is the fastest growing economy in the world, second biggest economy in the world. And we've got to learn from China. Because China went through a lot of problems which we face right now. China too had a lot of corruption. China had a lot of poverty. But the way China has dealt with both corruption as well as reducing poverty has been an example for not just Pakistan, but actually for a lot of the developing world. And we can learn more from China because China has recently developed, as opposed to the Western economies which have been developed, for a long time. I mean, they're way ahead of us in terms of the development evolution. They are way ahead of us. Whereas China has, since it's recently developed, we can identify a lot of problems which we are facing right now, which China managed to remove and move forward. So we can learn more from China than any other country. It's my second official visit anywhere. The first visit was to Saudi Arabia, and this is the next visit to China. I'm looking forward to it. I've only once been to China before, and that was 7 years back. As I said before, Pakistan can learn from the Chinese experience more than any other developed country. And what I hope to learn from is meeting the Chinese leadership, how we can benefit from Chinese experience. So particularly two fields. One is, of course, corruption, because fighting corruption is an expertise which we are still struggling to have. I mean, there's low crime, which is easy, but then there is white-collar crime, which needs speciality. It needs expertise, which we are struggling in Pakistan. Since President Xi came to power, 4 or 5 years, China has over 400 big name, powerful people have been convicted of corruption. So we are struggling in that area. So that's number one area which I hope to learn when I'm in China. Secondly is poverty alleviation. Just what China has achieved, no country in human history has managed to achieve, getting 700 million people out of poverty in 30 years. Main plank of a manifesto is to bring people out of poverty. So this is one area where I look forward to meeting the Chinese leadership and learn from all the various steps taken to take people out of poverty. Clearly, it's just not one step. It's a series of steps taken which has made China achieve this incredible feat which no nation has ever achieved. And then the other things, urban development, pollution, so many things which we face right now, which China faced and overcame. Areas in agriculture, China has progressed very fast, and we can learn from the Chinese experience, raise our yields, help our farmers. One of the reasons how you can remove poverty is removing rural poverty, which is on making the small farmer make money by higher yields and so on. So in different areas, I hope to learn a lot. Pakistan needs to export. Our trade balance with China is imbalanced because we import far, far more than we export to China. We want to get some help in pushing our exports. Our main problem in Pakistan right now is current account deficit. So, this is a great opportunity. There's a Pakistan pavilion where we will be exhibiting our exports. President Xi, by inviting me at this time, has enabled us to exhibit items which we can export. It's a great honor to be able to speak at this occasion as one of the chief guests. So I find that I'm humbled by this. It's a great honor to be invited. Secondly, our main export is textiles. So, and we also know China also exports textiles. But, we are hoping that, we will be exporting more value-added textiles. Then basically we have agricultural products, we have sports goods, we have surgical equipment which we export from Pakistan, leather goods. CPAC was always going to be in stages. So the first stage was basically a road, then trying to develop Gwadar, which is the second deepest port after Singapore. and ideally located. Then there were some power projects that became part of CPEC. But now is the next phase where we really hope that CPEC would bring in investment in Pakistan. We will have some technology transfer from China. In our special economic zones, we will be able to attract industry, which can help us export. Because our main problem in Pakistan is we have declining exports. And we really need to push our exports so that our current account deficit can be balanced. The next phases of CPEC will now be these industrial zones and in the industrial zones investment. But in the social sector, we also are looking forward to affordable housing is one of the projects. We hope the Chinese will have agriculture, very important. Technical education, very important again. I was just seeing a presentation on fisheries. China is way ahead of any other country in fisheries, and we have done almost no work in this area. And Pakistan has tremendous potential in fisheries because we have a 700-kilometer coastline, which has not been utilized. And then urban waters, where there's no new thing that has come up, is caged fishing, which China is probably the leading country in that. We hope that this partnership with China will help us develop these sectors. The economic challenge we faced, the biggest challenge was current account deficit, a declining foreign exchange reserves, and the fear was that we would not be able to meet either import obligations or service our debts. Hence, the immediate thing was to redress this balance. That could only have been done two ways. One was going to the IMF. The other one was seeking help from friendly countries who would help bolster up our foreign exchange reserves. So we have gone on these two tracks. Saudi Arabia has really been very generous. They've given us help. We have asked from another friendly country, UAE. We've asked help from them and hope to get some good news there. And again, with China, we hope that this trip will help us. Even when we go to the IMF, we will not be demanding that much loan from that, which might bring in conditionalities, which will be tough for our people. Because traditionally, IMF conditionalities put in a lot of burden on the common man, inflation, and then they squeeze the economy, the growth rate goes down, there's unemployment. And already the people are suffering in Pakistan. So the last thing we want is to put more burden on them. So our strategy is very straightforward, that we hope that even if we do go to the IMF, we do not take such a big loan, which then don't bring such strong, stringent IMF conditionalities, which will put burden on our people. That's our strategy, really. It's true, there are countries now scared of China's success. China's exports are growing at an alarming rate for some countries, and therefore you are seeing barriers being put in the way of Chinese exports. So we can see that trend. If you stop globalization, actually the world trade contracts after that. Globalization with certain checks and balance is healthy for world trade. And if for some reason the global trade is prohibited or impediments are put in the way, then the whole world suffers because the world trade contracts. I'm all for globalization, but I also do believe that in Pakistan, I'm strictly speaking about Pakistan, because we've had very poor governance, at the moment we are struggling to compete, our exports are struggling to compete. But we do believe that the steps we have taken, the reform program, which we have implemented in Pakistan, it's a very tough reform program which we have implemented for strengthening our institutions and improving our governance system. And once our governance system improves and the cost of doing business in Pakistan goes down, we will then be able to compete in world trade. We have struggled right now, and when a country struggles, that's when it needs help. So it needs certain help. The industries need help to stand on their feet. And once they get going, and I think China is an example of that country, because first your economy was closed, but as you opened up, your industries competed with the world, and as we all know, Chinese are exporting more than any other country. So one of the reasons, of course, also is to learn from the Chinese experience. You know, how we can improve ourselves and how improve our trade balance, how exports can compete. The Chinese development model is unique. The Western models were driven by the private sector. So it was the private sector, which the United States, it was driven by very powerful players in the private industry. And Europe also, there were big players in them. But Chinese model has been driven by the government and government-led development, which is unique. So China has had these long-term plans, and then they have had the discipline to stick to that trajectory to fulfill these long-term plans. Problem with democratic governments like ours, which are 5 years, and after every 5 years you have to have elections. Unfortunately, problem with our governments have been that they only look for 5 years. So all their concentration is that at the end of 5 years, they should have done something which will enable them to win the elections. That always distorts the development model, because development ideally is always long-term. If you do not have long-term development goals, then you will not be able to do what China has done. And China's success has been these incredible, the way they have fulfilled their long-term goals all along the way, what they have achieved. I don't think any country has had that success. But then China has done it through government-led growth, which is again very rare. And that's also the advantage is they've had been able to plan long-term, and secondly, they've had the discipline to stick to these the long-term goals.